I pledge my heart.
I pledge my heart
to the rainbow.
To the rainbow.
Of the not so typical gay camp.
Of the not so typical gay camp.
One camp.
One camp.
Full of pride.
Full of pride.
Indivisible.
Indivisible.
With affirmation and equal rights for all.
With affirmation and equal rights for all.
Watch your heads.
Welcome back to another episode of Please Call Me Crazy, brought to you by Free People Radio and powered by our favorite sponsor, TireGet.com. That's TireGet.com. You have to buy tires from somebody. You might as well buy them from us. Help fund the movement. Help support the movement. We believe in the freedom of movement, and that's exactly what the establishment wants to take from you now. I'm your host, Royce White, here in the belly of the beast, Minneapolis, Minnesota, and this is episode 180. A little bit of housekeeping. Again, we have broken 1 million views and 1 million downloads, both on YouTube and on all audio platforms. So we're very thankful to the entire audience for your continued support, your viewership, your listenership, not only today, but up until this point and certainly in the future. The podcast is available on all audio platforms, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, Google Play, and iHeartRadio. You can also catch us on Rumble. You can catch us on War Room's Getter page, Getter stream at night, and on their Rumble page. You can also catch this on X. You may be watching on X. I'm trying to, as best I can, stream the episodes on X as well, because they've proven to be a somewhat less censored platform than many others in big tech, and we definitely want to find the places that are the least censored. Monday through Friday, I'm on the John Fredericks Radio Network, and we will be uploading those audio replays to the Royce White USA YouTube channel. So make sure you go subscribe to that and be on the lookout for the Royce White Radio Show replays there, and Real America's Voice on Saturday mornings at 9 a.m. Eastern to lead in for the War Room and the great Steve Bannon. So be on the lookout for that as well. The Royce White Radio Show is at 9 p.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday, and soon we will have a new audio platform channel that will host both the Royce White Radio Show replays and the replays of the Real America's Voice TV show on Saturday morning. So that's where you can go to watch and listen to the podcast. We'll have to update the website, freepeopleradio.com, to include the Royce White Show and the Royce White Radio Show to let you know where you can watch and listen. We have a store there as well, so feel free to visit the store and browse around a little bit. There at the beginning, you saw a video, I believe, of Pete Buttigieg's husband instructing young children to pledge allegiance to the pride flag. And this is the agenda. I mean, many people may not understand that this has happened. Some people may not even care. Some people may not think it's a big deal. I think it's a very big deal. I honestly do. And for many reasons. And one, because to sexualize children, I thought we had already decided as a society was inappropriate or unacceptable, which is part of the reason why we put TV ratings and movie ratings on content the way that we do. TV mature, rated R, so on and so forth. I mean, those things are still in good standing, I believe, as standards of television, movies, how we think culturally about young people and them being influenced and impressionable and whatnot. So these cultural politics around the LGBTQ and it becoming the central focus of American politics is a huge issue. And again, first and foremost, because it's inappropriate to do to the children. I really do believe that. And furthermore, I mean, I don't, I'm a Christian, I'm a Catholic, I'm a heterosexual male. I don't necessarily think that heterosexualism, that's what it would be considered. If being heterosexual should be taught to young kids in a public school. I mean, I don't necessarily understand why sex is such an important issue in the public school in the first place. Now, I get that the entire sex ed norm came from a time where HIV had broken out and there was a huge scare about sexually transmitted diseases and infections and using protection, and then it became birth control, and so you had this kind of duality of the dangers of sex and the need, which has now almost become a cultural need for birth control, and then family planning and the whole. Okay, I get it. Um, how that is phased into justifying sexual lifestyle is quite beyond me. I mean, we don't tell young children about condoms and sexually transmitted diseases to try and impress upon them what we think are acceptable ways of having sex or living their life. In fact, the entire premise of the sex education curriculum for a long time was just don't have sex. I mean, the safest sex is no sex, and that was kind of the culture. I'm not sure where we made such a drastic turn, although I can say that if you look at media, if you look at the mainstream media in Hollywood, we have a hypersexual culture. And I get that it doesn't make sense for schools to try and pretend like the sexual culture that exists outside of the school doesn't exist. I mean, I get not being naive. But I would say that the LGBTQ agenda in the schools is taking it a tad bit far. I mean, we're not pledging allegiance to being heterosexual. We're not pledging allegiance to having more than one sex partner. We're not pledging allegiance to some strange symbol of being straight. And that's an important point to make. I can't impress upon people how important that distinction really is. It's strange. It's odd. It's odd. I mean, it's weird. And I don't say weird like it's not the norm. I mean, there's something very strange about it. Pledging allegiance to the pride flag or pride camp or gay camp. I mean, there is no heterosexual camp. Okay? That's not a thing. And so you have to ask yourself why. I mean, does every minority group need their own little cheering section? I mean, is that a part of the solution here in the country of bringing people together that every little minority group now needs their own little cheerleading section? They need their own little place where the people there affirm their little minority group for any and every idea that they have, any and every political agenda that they have. That's indoctrination. I would no more be okay with there being a public school that taught young people, young black students, that all white people are bad and that white people are evil or that white people should be exterminated. I wouldn't be okay with that. That'd be disgusting. It's a disgusting thing to do. Just in principle, it's disgusting to indoctrinate children. Well, the long-withstanding argument from all these other disparate minority groups and demographics, the entire DEI coalition, the entire the long-withstanding argument is that Christianity has indoctrinated children for a long time. And because we've indoctrinated children with Christianity against their will, it justifies indoctrinating them with any of these other political ideologies. I mean, that's identity politics at its finest, and it really shows what the overall spirit of this political agenda is, and that it is anti-Christian. I mean, as a matter of fact, as a matter of historical fact, the underpinnings, the foundations of the entire DEI identity politics movement is predicated as a juxtaposition to Christianity and Christianity's influence on American culture. Christianity's influence on American schooling, Christianity's influence on government and anything else. So there is a sort of culture war that is taking place, and its roots you can find in an anti-Christian edifice. First, look, if this is the first time you're watching the podcast, then let me be clear. You should probably go back and watch a few more because nobody has been more critical of the Christian community in this country than I have. Not for the same reason some of these woke pastors have, but more like the 501c3 tax exempt status. Some of you may not understand fully how the 501c3 tax exempt status works or how it's relevant to Christian institutions, Christian churches, or American Christians, but it's relevant. I mean, it doesn't get any more relevant than the government telling the church what they can and can't say under the threat of losing their tax exempt status and being basically a self-funded organization, a self-governing organization from an economic standpoint. So the 501c3 tax exempt status has from day one been a hindrance on the church and the way to muzzle faith leaders on what they can and can't say, how they can use the church as an influence or impact on the community's politics. So I'm hypercritical of the Christian community, probably not for the same reasons many others are. Certainly not for their exclusion of the LGBTQ or their traditional values when it comes to the relationships between men and women or marriage or any of those things. Those aren't my first criticisms, although I will say something else that has swept over this country, and I think in part due to or as a reaction to the identity politics and the anti-Christian edifice out there in this liberal mainstream media and education system and whatnot. I think part of that reaction is to believe that we can force people to love God, force people to know God and to love God and to submit to God by fiat. And that just doesn't work. You can't make people love or respect anybody. You can make them fear you, and sometimes fear is an adequate means of coercion. Obviously, I mean, the entire rules-based order, the entire global agenda, the entire military-industrial complex has proven that sometimes fear is an adequate means of coercion. Not a good one, not a sustainable one, not one without its own spiritual implications. But it can work. But you certainly can't make people love you, and you can't make people respect you. That's an axiomatic truth of the human condition. You cannot force people to love you or respect you. You certainly can't do it through fiat. If there's one way you could argue, you can all but ensure that people will love you and respect you is by being kind and doing good things and sacrificing for others. I mean, that's really the only surefire way to force people to love you. And even then, you can't force them. You can put yourself in a good position for people to love you and respect you, but you can't force anybody. And that, a part of our American Christian culture is we do sort of pretend we can force people to love God, to submit to God. We can't. And it's a real failure of spiritual and theological insight. Because we all know that sin comes from the will, from the human will, and that you're just as responsible for your thoughts as you are for your actions. So even if you're able to govern people's actions, doesn't necessarily mean you're able to govern their thoughts. And their thoughts are going to be judged by God the same as their actions. Now, I get that that's a little abstract and esoteric, and a government can't hope to try and govern all things, but then we should and we would do well to remember that when we try and replace God with the government, that there's actually no effective way that the government can govern all things, or really there's no effective way that the government can govern a big number of things with any efficacy, with any efficiency. It's hard to govern. It really is. I get it. And so I have my criticism of the Christian community, and I want to be very clear about that. I have my criticisms of the Catholic Church. I want to be clear about that. Now, do I think that the Catholic Church should be forced to marry gay people? Listen, this is one of these hot button issues. I get it. I mean, and it just becomes offensive because the go-to argument for the LGBTQ community is look at segregation. Every time you talk about gay marriage, it always reverts back to talking about black people. I mean, just every single time. By default, it reverts to talking about black people. Why? The argument is, well, what about when they would let black people sit at a lunch counter with white folks? Or if you don't force institutions to treat every and anybody the same, then before you know it, we'll be back to a place where black people aren't treated the same. I mean, it's disgusting. It's disgusting. It's offensive. It's an insult to our history as black people. It's an insult to our intelligence. We're not stupid. We know the difference between immutable characteristics and characteristics that are not immutable. My skin color is an immutable quality. In America, we have evolved to where the norm, the accepted societal norm is that we do not judge people or mistreat people based on their immutable characteristics. That's just, common goodness. We would agree, at least on paper. Doesn't mean that we behave that way, but we would certainly agree to the ethic countrywide, I would assume. And certainly, this whole boogeyman about MAGA and extreme Republicans and white supremacy. Look, I'm in the Republican Party. I went into the belly of what y'all thought was the beast, only to find out where you're living is actually the beast, the belly of the beast that you need to be worried about. I digress. I went to the Republican Party, and people agree. I mean, people won't openly say that we should go back to judging people based on their skin color. That's not a reality in the Republican Party, at least not where I am. And I disagree strongly with a lot of the Republicans in the party about their politics. But these sort of societal norms aren't disagreed upon. There's disagreement about the technical nuance of policy and what has what desired effect and outcome. What are the causes, let's say, and what's the desired effect or outcome? So, this boogeyman that we're going back to a pre-segregation America is nonsensical. But it is disrespectful and an insult to tie gay marriage into it for this reason. There is a difference between immutable characteristics and characteristics that are not immutable. What is immutable? Immutable is, things that you can't help, things that you have no control over. My skin color is an immutable characteristic. My height is an immutable characteristic. Me being a man is an immutable characteristic. Now, I know they would argue that, and they went to work on that, and pretty soon they'll go to work on the others. In fact, they already have. Now you can be trans race. Now you can be trans species. I mean, you see where it's going? And I know that seems like it's a caricature of the LGBTQ movement and that's an outlier. But you'd be surprised how slippery of a slope it is and how fast the extreme moves to become the norm. In fact, that's the argument that the Rachel Maddows and the rest of the mainstream media industrial complex makes about the MAGA movement. It's scary how fast what they consider to be extreme became the norm in the conservative America or Republican America. Well, the same thing is true for the LGBTQ movement, right? Isn't the outer fringe of the LGBTQ movement just as dangerous in the possibility of becoming the norm, especially when you talk about young children who are exceptionally impressionable? So isn't the outer fringe or extreme of the LGBTQ movement and agenda, doesn't that have the same potential to have, to become the norm or impact the children as you're saying that MAGA does the entire politics of the country? See, it's always rules for me, rules for we, rules for thee and not for me. It's always rules for thee and not for we. And that's why the Democrat Party is going to lose, whether it's this election or the next. The Democrat Party is a ticking time bomb, and what all you need to worry about is what they're going to do in that desperation, because they know it. The writing is on the wall. They're running for the hills. They're running for the hills. They know that once it's been seen, it can't be unseen. Once you see the truth, you cannot unsee it. There's nothing remotely appropriate or logical about the tenets of this LGBTQ movement and how important it's become in American politics. And it is important. And I told you before on another show, our three issues are the board of the debt, the forever wars. Their three issues are the environment, social equity, and democracy. Those are their three issues. With social equity, they pull 3 more issues. You got women's rights, you got gay rights, you got black people's rights. You got the Time's Up and Me Too movement, you got the LGBTQ movement, and you got the Black Lives Matter movement. And you know what? That's a pretty formidable cohort. I get it. There's a lot to pull from. There's a lot of propaganda you can push when you pull from so many different groups and create the coalition. But the reality is, when you get down to the fine details, you see that one actually steps all over the other. And that tension is brewing in the community. And it's going to hit with black folks first. And when that hits with the black folks, as it is now, you will see the true nature, the true face of the Democrat and liberal movement, the Democrat Party, liberal politics, that it's only for the political gain. It's not about the true, quality of life, standard of living, the well-being and prosperity, the freedom of the people they claim to protect, the people that they claim to fight for. It's not about you. It's about using you. It's about getting you to pledge your allegiance to them with as little investment and as little promises kept as possible. They don't got to keep any promises. Joe Biden told you. They're getting more brazen about it, right? Because they have to start to condition everybody for the break, right? And there's going to be a break. It's coming. They're going to spit right in your face. The Democrat Party is gearing up to drop the other shoe on a group of people, a demographic of people, black people in America that have been voting Democrat for 60 years. They're about to drop the other shoe. The other shoe is about to drop. We got no plans to keep our promises to you. Tough luck. Tough luck. White supremacy, well, you know what? Technology's king now. Technology's king now. So, your Yuval Noah Harari's will give you drugs in a video game. And that's our way of reconciling. That's our offering. That's justice. That's fair. That's humane treatment. In a technological world where we have no control where things are going, we can't control it. Technology is a thing of its own. It's AI, right? We have no control over where it's headed. And that future will give you drugs in a video game. Do your best. Good luck to you. And the two are connected. I mean, if you go to Davos, Switzerland, if you go to Geneva, if you go to Brussels, if you go to any of these international summits, some of them now in the Middle East and in Abu Dhabi and the Emirates and so on and so forth, this whole conversation revolves around these politics. Time's Up, Black Lives Matter, the LGBTQ, the Fourth Industrial Revolution, the rise of technology, global citizenship, AI automation, the Internet of Things. This is all a part of one working political agenda. Some of the agenda is to keep the people distracted. Some of the agenda is to keep the people working. Some of the agenda is to keep the people killing each other. But it's all one working agenda. And then they come right out and say it. I mean, Klaus Schwab came right out and said that the anti-system movement, I mean, this is how broad they go. So if you think I'm talking broader in generalities, I invite you to go listen to how broad they talk at the World Economic Forum. I mean, it doesn't get much more broad and abstract and esoteric than that. So much so, if you're not initiated in the way that policy and legislation really works at a country level, a nation level, it sounds like they're not saying anything, but they're actually saying a lot. And there's a clip of Klaus Schwab saying there's an anti-system. I mean, there's a system, and we've done well, and look at how much we've achieved. We've built this world up to have, accomplished all these great things, mostly technological in nature. We've accomplished a lot of things, and then there's an anti-system. And the anti-system is libertarianism. I mean, they're telling you who they are. I just saw the other day they called Donald Trump a fascist. I mean, tell me what's more fascist than a global political thought leader saying that the anti-system is libertarianism. The anti-system is the party of people or the political way of thinking that says we want the government out of our lives. These people are big government. They're global government. They're not hiding. They're not hiding. And they tend to be very, very interested in LGBTQ politics, so much so that at the same forum, they talked about how they used, I think it's CEI, no? Corporate Index, Corporate Equality Index. That's what it is, CEI. I think it is CEI. They use the Corporate Equality Index to try and regulate how corporations view LGBTQ politics through funding. That's what it is. I mean, they're going to start to shrink the amount of capital that you have access to if you don't check the boxes for this LGBTQ movement. That's how global it's become. That's how tied to the money it's become. All of you black folks out there think you got a seat at the table. I mean, they're just including you into it as a keepsake. You know, you're just a necessary piece of nostalgia of a time long past to keep everybody's minds, you know, suspended and frozen in history. That's why black people are even at the table. And when you start to look at the policies, you ask yourself, how is this going to benefit black folks? It's not. They have no plan for it to. In fact, they plan to strip you of your black identity before you know it. And this is already happening. People aren't even going to be identifying with their race or their culture, or their ethnicity, or their their genetic, geographical roots, if you want to call it that. They're not even going to be identifying with that anymore. I can't tell you how many black folks out there in the country, are more, at least on social media, which is a small sample size to begin with. Let's not overvalue it, but yet and still, it does tell us something. How many black people are out there more concerned with their LGBTQ pronouns than they are with being black? But they say that they're pro-black. They're black leaders, the black movement. The black movement has been co-opted by the LGBTQ, and the people who are rejecting it, who are starting to reject it, they're not cared for. They're not thought about. They're not embraced. One who was embraced recently, who has challenged the LGBT, has challenged this very thing, whether you like his politics or not, his other politics. Dave Chappelle. I read recently that he just got $2 billion. He just signed a $2 billion deal to do a nightly show. I mean, he's the thorn in the eye of the LGBTQ movement. Every special he talks about transgenderism. In every special they call him transphobic or homophobic. And this is why leadership is so important. This is why celebrities are important, because there are some people, such as Donald J. Trump, who happen to be positioned uniquely to affect the politics of our country and of our culture in a much greater way, in a much faster way. Donald Trump, because he was already a celebrity. He was already a television star. He already knew how to work the crowd. He already knew how to work a camera. He already knew how to convey an idea. He already had that charisma. He already had that name notoriety. He already knew how to deal with the media, how to deal with reporters. He wasn't shy. He wasn't, he wasn't starstruck by the big lights. He wasn't shy to answer the questions. And that helped him greatly. And it helped this country greatly. His experience from being in media helped this country greatly. It's still helping this country greatly, and it will continue to in the future. Dave Chappelle's another. Dave Chappelle is somebody who has gained a lot of respect in his career, because we all know he turned down a lot of money to stand on the principle, to stand on some principles. Whether you agree with all his politics or not, we have to show respect and acknowledgement for people who were willing to say no, to sign their name on the dotted line and sell out the principles, the morals, the ethics, who were willing to sacrifice the fame and glory that many people wouldn't on principle. We have to respect and acknowledge that. And Dave Chappelle did that. And because of that, not only did it help his art, it helped his comedy. I mean, there's a reason why Dave Chappelle has matured into being considered leaps and bounds ahead of many other comedians throughout history, not just of his era, but on a historical basis. He's considered one of the greatest comedians of all time on most people's lists. And if you think him sacrificing that money didn't help his art, then you don't know you don't understand the human condition. Of course it did. And he's been come to be respected as somebody whose stand-up comedy isn't just funny, but it touches at a lot of the most important issues of our time, whether you agree with them or not. And so for him to be able to position himself to get a $2 billion deal, to have a nighttime show, even though he was willing to criticize the LGBTQ movement, is important. Is it the last battle? Is it the final victory? No. It's just another step in the right direction. And I disagree with Dave Chappelle on a lot of things politically. I really do. But I understand the bigger picture. That's important. Only Dave Chappelle could do it. Only Dave Chappelle could do it. In fact, Kevin Hart was lashed. He was lashed publicly when he tried to rail against the LGBTQ. And that tells you a little bit about how a comedian like Kevin Hart, who they've propped up across the mainstream media to seem like he's the guy, really doesn't necessarily have as much juice as we all are supposed to think. We all may think. Kevin Hart almost lost everything he had for railing against the LGBTQ. Dave Chappelle was just propped up. He was just lifted up for doing it. And that gets to another point I wanted to make today along this same vein with celebrity. And look, politics can be a popularity contest. And popularity plays a role in things. It plays a role in politics. It plays a role in American culture. I'm not saying popularity is a non-issue. But we must always strive to look deeper than popularity, because popularity can be deceiving. If we know nothing else from our American history, it's that popularity can be manufactured. Popularity can be manufactured, and thus the consent of the American people can be manufactured, and we've seen plenty of both. So it's not always about popularity. Popularity is a factor. It can be a factor. It can be beneficial. It can expedite things. Would it make a huge impact if I don't know, if Barack Obama had a coming to Jesus moment and said, hey, the Democrat Party is not really serving the interests of the American people, and I've had a complete 180 when it comes to the way I think, that would have a big impact. Partly because of how popular Barack Obama is. It would never happen. And that's the flip side of the coin, is popularity has a way of having a corrosive effect on the people that it's bestowed upon, the people that it's given to. And every once in a while, you get an anomaly. And Donald Trump was an anomaly. Dave Chappelle's an anomaly. And I'm just thinking of people who had one position before, who had one position in our culture before, in the public before, and then made a drastic turn or made a drastic choice and became at odds with the establishment and the status quo, and it ended up being a benefit. There are plenty of others out there. I was watching Monique the other day. There was a clip of Monique on Shannon Sharp's podcast, and Shannon Sharp, who I particularly don't necessarily agree with. I don't agree with on a lot of things, to be honest. But, he did the interview with Cat Williams, and that was a great interview. I think people should go and watch it. It's gone viral many times over. And Cat Williams is somebody who was uniquely positioned to be able to say some things that controversial. But then I saw a clip from the Monique podcast with Shannon Sharp. And she talked about how black women were trained to think that black men aren't shit. And there's something very true about that. Something a lot of people don't want to hear. A lot of black women don't want to have to hear, but it's true nonetheless. And she even made the joke at the end. You wonder why the good black man, you finally get that good black man. You don't even know how to treat him. In some cases, you end up running him off and he ends up with a white woman. And now you saying that he's wrong. I mean, Monique has always been real like that. Even as a stand-up comedian, I remember growing up watching the Queens of Comedy, and it's a little vulgar and a little, what do they call it, explicit and whatnot. But Monique has always had a very real delivery of her stand-up comedy. Big fan of Monique as a stand-up comic. Big fan. Big fan. And I'm not even so familiar with what took place with her. Honestly, I just saw the clip of Monique's interview with Shannon Sharp. I didn't watch the whole thing. I may try and do that. Because I'm interested in the story about what happened with Monique. I'm vaguely familiar with it. I mean, I remember it being a big deal, and Monique sort of being canceled or censored in her own way as a black woman, nonetheless. I mean, it goes to show you the identity politics are only surface. They're only yay high, right? Because even as a black woman, if you step out of bounds, you get penalized. But anyway, so there are people who are uniquely positioned. Popularity is not everything, but it can be helpful. And so, the pendulum swings both ways. And with this LGBTQ movement, I just see everybody running and hiding. I mean, it might be the most powerful cultural political movement in American history. People are either, capitulating to it, they're bending the knee, they're running and hiding, or they're jumping on board. Okay. It's some variation of those things. A lot of people jumping on board. And I've said before, and I'll say it again, look, LGBTQ citizens have rights. They have constitutionally protected rights, and those rights should stand. Nobody's calling for the persecution or the execution or the condemnation or the bullying of people who are LGBTQ, but some of this stuff is getting out of control. I see an Instagram video of a mom saying that her daughter wanted to identify or identifies as a cat or some animal, and that the teacher said that it's causing a disturbance in the classroom for this child to be purring or meowing or licking themselves, while the teacher's talking, and that somehow the school and the teacher are obligated to accommodate this child's identity. I mean, where are we going with this? And this whole the reason I'm saying it is because the reason I'm talking about this is because it goes back to a broader political idea about spiritual boundaries, about a nation with no boundaries, about people with no boundaries, and a society or culture with no boundaries, no borders, no physical and spiritual borders, no standards, no ethics. This is what we're talking about. And the LGBTQ movement is a perfect example. That's why the identity of the movement has expanded much further than it began, and there's no end in sight. And there is no end in sight. I mean, the whole modus operandi of the LGBTQ movement at bottom is really to say we need to live in an identityless society. And you don't find that dangerous? And you don't see it as a herald? I think of great comic books like Marvel and DC, and I think of intergalactic bad guys, intergalactic villains. It's a better word for it. Intergalactic villains like Galactus. In Marvel, there was an elemental sort of intergalactic titan named Galactus, and if you're familiar with the Fantastic Four and the Silver Surfer originally began in the comic book as a herald of Galactus. He was a part of a group of heralds that would go around and find planets that were suitable for Galactus to come and devour. This was a planet-eating titan, Galactus. It's a great comic book and great series. Anyway, Silver Surfer was a herald. So I think about these villains and I think to myself, well, if globalism is the problem, if transhumanism is if artificial intelligence is going to be the great villain of our future, who are the heralds today? What are the heralds today? The LGBTQ movement is a herald of artificial intelligence. It's a herald of a herded and cold society. It's the herald of humanity's extinction. I mean, think about it. If we're saying that technology and computers have the chance to overcome human intelligence, The first time we go to merge, physically merge now, I mean, not merge with the phone. Not to say that's not dangerous too, but when we take the step to finally physically merge with the machine world, what's going to keep the machines from just taking us over? I mean, that's a real question we have to ask now. When the neural links are up and running and you physically merge with the machine world, what's going to stop the machine world from taking you over? What's going to stop the artificial intelligence from overcoming your human intelligence? And that seems like some abstract fear, some abstract boogeyman, but it's right here at our front door. The neural links are going out. It's right here. The cryo chambers are there. They're trying to find ways to merge human beings with machines. And so if you lose that lack of identity, whether it's your skin color or your gender or your history or your culture or your citizenship, if there's this this wholesale attack on identity, before you know it, you have no identity, and your identity is nothing more than your immediate physical existence, circumstance, which just out of nature, you will try and preserve. And it'll be easy to tell you, hey, a Neuralink will keep you alive another 30 years. And it may, in fact, keep you alive another 30 years. But that doesn't mean the part of you that lives will be recognizable to you or to anybody else. And that's the underlying danger here of this attack on identity. American identity, Christian identity, the identity of men and women, the identity of black people and white people and whoever else. Should we divide ourselves up by identity? Should we be hostile to one another because of identity? Absolutely not. We should strive to be better than that. We should fight against that. But some of that is natural. And some of that is going to happen. And some of that we shouldn't give up at the expense of something worse. And I get this sense right now that out of our desire to come together and hold hands as one, and sing Kumbaya, we're letting in a dangerous predator that we don't even really understand or know is there. A society without an identity is a society that's lost, especially if you're a Christian. I mean, if your identity isn't rooted in your faith in God, if your faith I'm reminded of Anna Kasparian from the Young Turks and that clip where she's just, losing her shit, talking about the Bible and how fairy tale fictitious the Bible is and how ridiculous it is that people think that others should have to live by the Bible. And she makes a fair point. She makes a fair point that even by biblical standards, we don't want to force you to love God. You get the choice. You get the choice same way Adam and Eve did, same way Noah did, same way Samson did, same way that Moses did, same way that Christ did. You get the choice. That's the beauty in it. That's what makes the process legitimate, actually, is you get the choice. If you didn't get the choice, there'd be no legitimacy whatsoever. That's what makes sports great. You got to choose to put the work in. You got to choose to sacrifice. You got to choose to be passionate and committed and disciplined. If you didn't get the choice, it wouldn't be fun to watch. If it was all computerized, a warning, I'm heeding, that circles back to the future if it was all computerized, what would be the fun in it? I mean, even in the video games you play, they got to build in that sort of human free will choice and outcome, or else it's not fun. There's no fun in it. Freedom, free will. These ideas aren't rooted in white supremacy. The idea of freedom, as Rachel Maddow would say, isn't rooted in America's, in America's inception as a nation. Yeah, it was specified, it was highlighted, it was emphasized in our founding documents. But the idea of free will goes back to the Garden of Eden. They don't want you to talk about that. They don't want to talk about that. They don't want to acknowledge that. They don't want to acknowledge that for all of their mocking of Christians and Jesus Christ, all of their calendars, all of their historical calendars still go by the birth and death of Jesus Christ, even in other countries. I don't care where you are. I don't care where you are in the world's history is measured based on the life and death of Jesus Christ. The birth and death of Jesus Christ. Before Christ, after death. Doesn't that say something? Doesn't that say something? When you think that's just a relic of the colonial empire and them forcing Christianity on everybody else, why doesn't China change it? Now, I'm sure they will at some point. I mean, because, as we go away from, those Christian influences, people will start to do it just out of spite. And that's fine, Come up with your own historical calendars. So good. I mean, part of the reason we all need one historical calendar is because we want to live in this global society. I'm not a fan of it. I'm not a fan of it. I don't think we need to live in a global society. I don't think we need to be global citizens. I don't give a shit what they're doing in the Balkan states. I said it before. I'll say it again. I'll say it until we bring our fucking money back to the United States of America and stop being involved in this forever war with Russia. I don't give a shit what happens in the Balkan states. I really don't. Not when my childhood friend, my great childhood friend, is getting shot and killed by some 19-year-old who's robbing cars. I mean, again, I said on the radio show this week when talking about my friend's death, Maurice Thomas Jr., say his name, you Democrat Finocchios. When talking about his death, I said that the measure of a good economy has nothing to do with the stock market. Don't show me stocks. Don't show me stocks to talk about the health of the economy. I mean, what kind of silk stocking Republican-ass move is that? I don't give a shit about your stocks. Show me how many people believe that they should kill or steal to secure their next meal, and that'll tell you the overall health of the economy. How many people believe that they're in such a desperate situation, whether true or not? Whether culturally they believe they need something more than they do, or they actually don't have anything to eat. Either way, that's the sign of the health of the economy. That tells you how healthy the economy is. And in that way, economics aren't just hard math. There's something spiritual to it. And in that way, it's very similar to currency as a whole. Currency is not just hard math numbers. It's an agreement. It's an agreement. It's a belief. You believe that the dollar's worth something, everybody agrees to believe that the dollar's worth something, that it's worth something. As soon as they stop, it's not. And we've seen that before in many banana republics. It happens. Currency goes up. Paper doesn't mean nothing. You'll see a guy, with a dolly and crates of paper money, and he might as well burn them to stay warm because he can't buy nothing with it. We've seen it before, and it'll happen again. The question is, will it happen here in America? And the question is, will we allow the LGBTQ to take center stage and herald us towards human extinction? Herald us towards transhumanism and all these other things, and completely overlook the economy. You want to go to an economy where the government knows every last one of your transactions, where you can't buy anything with cash, where there is no cash? You want to go to a cashless society? They already stopped making pennies. Nickels will go next. Before you know it, there'll be no change. There'll be a pandemic, and it won't be safe to exchange change or dollars. They did that. I still see people who are cashless from the pandemic. They never switch back. Oh, well, money is dirty. It's germy. And money is dirty. I mean, let's be honest. Money's actually dirty. It really is one of the most dirty things in our society. So I'm not saying there's not truth to it, but that's not why they're doing it. They don't give a shit. They don't give a shit how much dirt you're exposed to. They don't give a shit what your body's exposed to. They don't give a shit about your well-being. Nothing points to evidence that this establishment and the status quo has anything to do with freedom and well-being. It's the exact opposite. We have a death and debt culture. We have a death and debt society. And those are the fundamental fundamental issues, ideas that we have to acknowledge and then decide on. That's the referendum. The referendum on American citizens this election cycle is, do we want to continue to live in a death and debt society? A death and debt culture, a death and debt economy. Do we want to live under the umbrella of death and debt? Is there something better? Freedom and well-being. There's two. I'm not saying I got the answers. All the easy answers are behind us. I get that. All the easy answers are behind us. But we got to start somewhere. We definitely live in a death and debt culture. And there's a better way. I hope you believe there's a better way. And I know there's a lot of sadomasochists out there. And they like this, and they call me the doom and gloom guy. I'm not the doom and gloom guy. I'm a happy, joyous, fun-loving guy. I really am. But I'm a realist. I'm going to tell you what it is, when it is, how it is. I'm going to tell you it straight like it is. We live in a death and debt culture. We could choose something different, but we have to choose it. If we don't choose it, we'll stay in exactly where we are. That's true of anybody with anything. You can be a good player or you cannot be a good player. You get to make the choice. If you make the choice, 9 times out of 10, you get better. You may not be as good as you think, as good as you want to or dream about, but you definitely can get better. If you're 400 pounds, you definitely can lose weight. You got to make that choice. If you don't make that choice, nothing changes. The same goes with our politics. And we do have some tough questions to answer. I mean, we really do. There's going to be nothing easy about these solutions. There's going to be nothing easy about these solutions. But we better get to answering those questions and trying to find those solutions. Under no circumstances are we going to be able to do anything if we stay gridlocked and distracted and shackled and muzzled and hogtied and imprisoned, enslaved by these identity politics. It's got nothing to do with not solving any issues. It's actually creating more fake issues that we create fake solutions to than it's giving us real solutions to the problems we really face. Pit black versus white, make off with the green. Pit black versus white, make off with the green. That's what your elites have done. It's a basic scam. I mean, if we're going to lose our freedom, if we're going to lose our well-being, if we're going to lose our citizenship, don't lose it to some cheap 3-card Monte hustler on the street corner, because that's what this is. That's a cheap 3-card Monte card trick. Cheap, not even sophisticated. I forgot what the magician's name is. It escapes me, but bring me Houdini. I mean, if you're going to trick me out of my freedom and citizenship, it better be an elaborate trick. It better be a genuine illusion. It better actually be worth the price of admission. These tricks aren't even sophisticated. Oh, look over here. Put them up. Oh, look over here. Put them up. The overlay for the underlay. I mean, it's just basic. You're going to keep paying your tax money. You're going to keep paying your tax money. You're going to keep abnegating your civic duty to really understand what the politics are from the politicians that you vote for or don't vote for. Some of you, like Jason Whitlock, will say, I'm not voting. Never voted before, never going to be, not going to vote this time. I just refuse to vote. Okay. I mean, even if you don't want to vote, I mean, what rock is that to stand on? Okay, why even tell us that? Who gives a shit? Don't vote then, motherfucker. Well, I mean, what benefit is it? What does that say? What does that convey? What does that do? What does that motivate? What does that inspire? I'm sitting here telling you, honest to God, I really do believe that the system is rigged. But I don't think that it's beyond our ability to repair. It's beyond our choices. It's not. And part of it starts with your politics. I told you all before. Mostly in this country, politics is decided by the people who show up. For example, on April 20th, I'm going to have a debate with my Senate opponent, Joe Frazier. 26 years, military intelligence, served in Afghanistan, served in Iraq. We're going to have a debate right here in downtown Minneapolis. 100 or so people. Now, those people who show up are the people who usually do your politics. These people are delegates. These people are in the Republican Party. These people have positions as treasurer and this and that and executive committees and things that you don't even really know about, maybe. But they decide the outcome of this country. They decide the outcome of elections. They decide the outcome of American politics. And then we kind of wake up on Sunday morning and look around at the world and see how crazy shit is and goes, damn, how did that happen? How did it get like this? It wasn't by accident. It didn't just happen. Very smart people, very organized people. They know how the system works. They were interested in how the system works. They were interested in learning how the system works. They were trained in how the system works. They have intergenerational wealth that went specifically to train them in how the system works. They know how the system works, and they play with how the system works. And they show up. And if they can't show up themselves, they get people to show up. Run for district. This is the reality. And the one spot that I will say is a tough one to criticize is how bad the legal system has gotten. Because the price of entry is so high, right? I mean, you can't just walk into law school. You can't just volunteer to become a lawyer. You can't just decide to take the bar exam and pass it. And that is where the rule of law has been the most, maybe the most corrupt sentiment of American political culture in our nation's history. Because we want to say that the price of entry is gonna be high, and the people who have access to that domain, that field, are all going to be righteous. Who's the vanguard of that? The Bar Association. The Bar Association is going to determine, they are determining the fate of our nation. The Bar Association. Lawyers, judges, district attorneys, prosecutors, defense attorneys, legal litigators. I mean, it's all one super racket. And sure, you can look at it and say, hey, we got a justice system, got to have justice, got to have a rule of law. If you have no law, you can't have order. If you don't have order, you got chaos, sure. But what about when the law becomes the chaos? What about when the law itself becomes the chaos? That's what we have now. I mean, you can't say that a man is a man and a woman is a woman, but you can say that a man raped a woman, Donald Trump. You can call a man a rapist when he was never convicted of criminal rape in a court of law. But you can't say a man is a man and a woman is a woman. I mean, this is the country that we've built. This is the society we live in. And this is smart. This is being educated. This is being enlightened. This is being woke. This is being wise and insightful. This is being stupid. Nay, I say this is being retarded. Actually, retarded people are doing better than this. Because at least they're not deceiving themselves. You know, if you have a sort of, cognitive disease, cognitive impairment, if you have a sort of mental retardation, another immutable quality, right? Which is how the disabled and black people and people who are tall or small or any of these immutable characteristics, they differ from the LGBTQ. Now, some people will classify that the LGBTQ is within the domain of mental illness, and in many cases, I think that probably there's a lot of merit to that. In some cases, I think it's spiritual. In some places, the two cross over. In some places, we are not a static being. This is not a static existence. And I don't mean that to say, binary versus non-binary. I mean that mind, body, and spirit are one. And the idea that they're separate may have always been a lie. That was an info war. There is no separation between the mind, the body, and the spirit. Not until you die and cross over into the spiritual. Then the spirit is separated from the mind and the body. But as a living being, The mind, the body, and the spirit, they work in tandem. And your physical sins and your physical will have an impact on your spirit and your mind will have an impact on your physical and so on and so forth. There's great scientific evidence to point to that. That's why we call it comprehensive health. And I say that to say, is the LGBTQ movement a matter of mental health? In some cases it's spiritual. In some cases it's physical. In some cases they're all connected. But I will tell you this also. It strikes me as odd as a mental health advocate that some of the worst mental health outcomes we see in the LGBTQ community, and nobody wants to have the discussion that that's tied to a mental health issue. That the lifestyle itself or the identity itself or the politics that have become common in the LGBTQ movement have an outcome or an impact on people's mental health. They want to tell the story the other way, that the way those people are treated is why their mental health is not good. And some of that may be true. I'm not saying people who are LGBTQ aren't mistreated. Obviously, today they're not as mistreated as they're portrayed. I mean, they're celebrating them and pledging the allegiance to them as though they're on par with their American citizenship. Their sexual identity, their gender identity is on par with the importance of their citizenship. How can they have rights without citizenship? I actually think they're trying to herd these LGBTQ people, to be honest, if I'm being honest, because I know how two-faced, these liars and Marxists and globalists can be. Trust me, when the concentration camps come, they're not making no exceptions for the LGBTQ. When the concentration camps come, you're going to be carted off like the rest. When the transhumanism takes effect, you're going to be carted off like the rest. You're going to be drugged and given video games like the rest. And that's sad. I mean, that is really sad. I feel terrible about that. At least we know the enemy we're fighting. It's another, one of the worst things you come across, let's say when you're reading a book, reading a story, watching a movie, watching a TV show or any type of story. The worst thing is always when you're betrayed from the people inside. That the worst moment is when the protagonist in a story is on his way to accomplishing something, whether it be small in the arc of the story or something big over the course of the story. The worst thing that you can, what gives you the worst feeling is that friend turns their gun on you from behind, right? That person that you trusted, that person that you trusted, it found that opportune moment to betray you and make it almost impossible for you to accomplish something that you would have otherwise accomplished. That's the worst stories. That's the worst part of the story. Like he was almost there. He would have done it, but that friend that was close to him just betrayed him at that very important and critical juncture. And that's going to be the LGBTQ movement. The LGBTQ movement, okay, hurrah. You've got a thing going. I think it's been manufactured. I think it's partly a psyop. I think the CIA and the State Department is helping this thing go because a weak America, or even more fairly, a confused America, at the very least, a confused America is a weak America. But hurrah, you've taken a long walk. You got a lot of juice politically all around the world. I get it. But do you really think that they care about your prosperity and well-being? And the question you got to ask yourself is, do you care about your prosperity and well-being? And that's the same question all of us have to ask ourselves. Why is it that lesbian couples have a disproportionate amount of domestic violence? If men are so bad, why is it that lesbian couples have a disproportionate amount of domestic violence? And it is true. And anybody who did, just go look it up. I mean, I like the facts. There is a disproportionate tendency to physical violence between two women in a lesbian couple. I've seen it myself. I grew up in the Twin Cities. We have a very prominent LGBTQ community, and I know it to be true. Volatile lesbian relationships. Not that there aren't other volatile, relationships are volatile, disproportionate in the lesbian community, I would say. Well-being, prosperity. I'm talking about the LGBTQ, but we all got our crosses to bear, and we all have a role to play in things that we have to overcome personally as a community to fight back the norm that we've created. It ain't all on the LGBTQ, and I'll say that in closing. It's one of the most obnoxious and outrageous things that we've allowed to happen. To see a young classroom full of children and young people. A classroom full of young people and pledging allegiance to the pride flag. It's pretty far out there, but it's not the biggest issue. It really isn't. The biggest issue is that so many people bent the knee and allowed it to happen, and the reason they allowed it to happen, that goes back to what we talk about 95% of the time on this podcast. Sacred honor, national honor, people not having any boundaries, people not having any morals, any code of ethics. People not having any boundaries, any spiritual borders. Selling out for money. For whatever. Whatever they think is worth it, is valuable. Selling out. That's the reason why the LGBTQ movement has stood up and walking around the way it is now. That's the reason. People either bend the knee, they run and hide, or they jump on board. Pledge allegiance to the United States of America. Pledge allegiance to the country that grants you rights, inalienable rights. Granted to you by Creator. I'm sorry, the United States does not grant you these rights. The Creator grants you these rights, and the United States of America sees to it that no enemy, foreign or domestic, can infringe upon those rights granted to you by a Creator. Pledge allegiance to that. Or, continue to follow Pete Buttigieg. I'm sure that's going to work out well for you. This has been another episode of Please Call Me Crazy, brought to you by Free People Radio and powered by our favorite sponsor, TireGet.com. That's TireGet.com. You have to buy tires from somebody. You might as well buy them from us and help fund the movement, help support the movement. We believe in the freedom of movement, and that's exactly what the establishment wants to take from you now. I'm your host, Royce White, here in the belly of the beast, Minneapolis, Minnesota. We'll see you Friday, the great Professor Penn, in another Hebrews episode, followed by a special weekend episode, I believe, we're hoping, with the great A.J. Barker. We got some good episodes coming up here in the near future. Plan to get Steve Bannon back on. It's been a long time since he and I had a good hour-long conversation in a long format. And we got some other people coming as well. It's a hot political season, and we're going to try and get as many people on as possible to help articulate the broad base of views here in the America First movement, and the Ultra MAGA movement, and the conservative movement. We're looking forward to the guests that we have lined up. So it's been real. Thanks for being here again. Again, condolences to my friend Maurice Thomas and his family at this time. They did find a suspect that they've charged with homicide in the shooting of my friend Maurice Thomas. The young black man was 19 years old and had been stealing from cars, breaking into cars earlier that day. And that's the state of things in the black community. It's not just the black community. I don't say that, but here we have a case where it would appear that a young black man took the life of an older but still very young black man, and for what? Money, food, clothes. What is it? Well, what's worth it? The measure of your economy is not your stock market. The measure of your economy is how many people feel they need to betray what's good and what's right just to get another meal, just to get whatever they think is valuable. To think they need to steal or kill just to survive. That's the measure of your economy. The fight continues. As always, Godspeed.